Hey guys, welcome back to part number 2 of my 32nd scale Tamiya F-16 build. So today we're going to look at the intake, getting the seams out and the whole intake trunk, and also the wheel wells. We have to get those wheel wells landing gear all done now because the way it builds, you have to kind of put panels over the top of it, so you can't wait till the end. So we'll be building all that on this part. So a lot to go through, so let's go ahead and get started. Hey guys, Richie here, back from part number 2 of my F-16 build. Last week we did the cockpit, and now we're going to work on the intake and the associated wheelbase, which kind of attached to it. So, pretty prevalent, an F-16, big mouth, big intake, and it's important to get that seam line out. Even though we do have the resin fog covers, we have a plan B. Quick note, last week when I was at the cockpit I had a macro lens on, just so really you can see that kind of detail close up. It took a while, it's more of a camera lens, so it rather than a video cinematography one, so it took a while to focus and that kind of stuff. We're back to my usual lens, so hopefully you see a little bit difference in better focusing and quality. Right, so going back to F-16, like I say, this is part number 2, which is the intake. Part number 1 was a cockpit. The great thing about this kit is it's very modular, in that you can kind of do this any way you want, build all these different components, and then at the end kind of bring them all together. So the instruction actually calls out for the engine first, which I've not even started yet. Then it works onto the intakes, and then onto the cockpit. So again, we're kind of doing different order. Just, I mean, you can do this, I say, any way you like, whatever your kind of preference is. So that being said, we were around about part 23 of the instructions. Now we're going to kind of spin back a few pages, and we're on to part number 13. See that a little bit here. So the nice thing is, all of this is going to be painted the same color, white. So we can go ahead and attach all this, with the exception of F13, which is this kind of like, I think it's oxygen cylinder or nitrogen or something, which is painted a different color decal. So we'll add that at the very end. So what I do is, when I go for my instructions, anything I do at the very end, I just highlight right here. So it means that when I go, when everything is assembled and I go back through, I don't miss anything. I know what I still got to add. So that being said, you can see in front of me here, I already started, actually already built all this stuff up together. There's no point in me showing you this on camera. It's just straightforward, following the instructions. Nothing really kind of right hooked out. So I took all the pieces off. We need, see right here, and I basically put instructions, added the small parts in here. Like I mentioned, it's all going to be white, so I might as well just go glue them at the same time. And I also attached the two parts of the intake together. See, I don't know if you can see, I have a slight seam line, but overall really nice fit. And same here, attach these two parts together too. So what I did was I used the Tamiya cement, the thicker glue, and wiped it on and then kind of sandwiched it together, because that really helps too with the kind of helping fill in gaps. It kind of spreads out to real thick glue. So I glued like that, I let it dry for a few minutes, and then came back with the extra thin. Now what I did was I used an old paintbrush, because obviously this brush is very short. So I basically just took the extra thin with my old paintbrush, and then so I get all the way down and get that glue onto those seams on the inside to kind of weld together. So I did that on that part and this part. So far, like I said, I've assembled the rest of the stuff. This is going to hand paint. This is back at the engine bay. So if I kind of loosely kind of put it all together, you can get an idea of what's going on here. So that's where the engine goes at the very back. And then I believe this piece slides in like that. Wait, let me get upside down. I think. Okay, and then your intake goes like that. So it screws into the aircraft. So basically, I believe it's like that's your shape basically, the right way around. So you got the wheel bay there for the main gear, and then here we're gonna add a little bit later on. We're gonna add some more for the front nose gear, and that's where your engine goes at the back. So it gets you an idea of how it goes together. Really nice fit, but obviously we want to paint all this first. So the next part is, as I said, we've got all the parts cleaned up and assembled. So what we want to do is we'll take care of these seam lines inside both this part, main kind of trunk, and then the actual intake here too. So let's go ahead and start working on showing how we get rid of those seam lines. So the intake on an F-16 is obviously very prominent, right there, centered, and very big. So we want to make sure we take care of those seam lines. Now, as I mentioned before, I do have a plan B, and it's the Mastercasters resin FOD set. This wasn't very expensive at all, so if you don't want to go up the hassle of building seam lines, use for the FOD cover on, and you wouldn't even see inside. I kind of like these because you can kind of paint them red. It gives a nice pop of color, and they do look nicely textured as well. So my plan is I'm also going to get, obviously want to get these seamless, these intakes, but it'd be nice to have these at maybe a push fit, so I can kind of put them on or remove them, either way. Just a note on Mastercasters. I bought a few things from them before, no problems at all. It come pretty quickly, no issues, but for some reason, last order, I didn't get it. I ordered it and waited like 2 months, and I got no shipping notification or nothing. Obviously with COVID-19, I give people extra time, so I emailed the guy and said, hey, does it ship out? Kind of polite email, no response. A week later, emailed him again, say, hey, did you get my last email? Just wondering if it shipped out. I haven't received my item yet. Zero response. So I had no option but to go through and do a PayPal claim, and he didn't respond to that either. So I'm not sure what's going on with this company right now. Just beware, Mastercasters. You can buy them in Hammonds and other companies, but if you buy from them direct, I bought a couple of seats for my 32nd Growler, which look great, which I hope to get one day. But like I said, it just never arrived, and the guy never responded. So that's never good. But again, Mastercasters for this. Right. So going back to these intakes. So how clear you can see on the camera, probably not too well. You can kind of see down that side. I kind of added some stuff already. This side needs to do it. I think you can just about make it out light there. It's a very slight seam line, not big. So we have that piece and this piece. Again, as you know, they just fit together. Oh, I think it's that way around, right? So this is actually one big intake trunk, which we're going to tackle on separate pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some dissolved putty. Now this isn't my own method, kind of made up or anything. It's just a Phil Flory thing I've taken from something I've seen in one of his videos. So this is a Phil Flory method, not my own. So just kind of get a shout out to him. So it's going to be using Mr. Dissolved Putty, which is a Guns product, Mr. Hobby. It's kind of like a Mr. Servicer kind of thing, but it's very kind of thin, kind of gloopy. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to thin it out with some self-leveling thinner, lacquer thinner. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little piece, let's give it a little stir, settle a little bit. Don't need much at all, just a little. A little bit right there, and then I'm going to add some thinner. If you notice, I'm actually using a different bottle. I use my, I find with these things it comes out really quickly. They do special spouts for them. I can't see one right now on my desk, but even with a spout, they're kind of a little bit hard to control. Whereas with the good old-fashioned Vallejo bottles, they have really nice kind of nozzles or tips, whatever you call them, and you really get like a control, like a couple of drips at a time. So I just marked them up with some tape. This is Gun self-leveling thinner. I have about 5 or 6. Basically all my thinners I put into these bottles once they're empty. So anyway, so I'm just going to add a little thinners to this. And I'm just going to mix it up. So it's like watery. I guess use that old thing, adage in modeling, like skim milk, I guess. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour it down and let it run down the gaps. So you might need to do this a couple of times, but let it dry in between. So basically I'm just going to take my little tray here, which has like a little pot to pour. Just a tiny little drop. Come on. There you go. And let it run down. Easy as that. So, actually, let's tip it up the other way. Oh. Okay, do the same with this guy. Make sure it's on the right side. I guess this side. Actually, the other side needs doing again too. So you might need, like I said, might need to do this 2 or 3 times. Come on. There it goes. coming off a little bit. Come on. While I'm at it, I'll do the other side again. Just let it run down. So that's it. So we're going to do that, let it dry a couple of hours, or maybe overnight, and then probably need 1 or 2 more. And then what we'll do after that is we'll come up with a Q-tip dipped in some self-leveling thinner and just rub it around, and it'll get rid of the excess dissolved putty which is down there. So that's pretty much it, as easy as that. Okay, so the intakes are taken care of, the seams taken care of, and it's spray white in the inside. Both this guy and the front part of it. Now, full disclosure, it's taken about a week or 2 since I started this intake to really kind of get to the stage. So my mojo was kind of waning a little bit in this section. It was just really getting me down. So as you saw just a minute ago, I used that Mr. Dissolve putty. And I had to wait like a week for it to arrive, so that kind of delayed me somewhat. And it worked okay, but I still saw a bit of a seam line. So in the end, I just went back to my old school way of just using Mr. Surfacer 500, which is a little thicker. So with a paintbrush, I just kind of wiped it on the inside, and it seemed to do a better job. But the pain was, I sprayed it, and it's hard to get it really smooth. So what I had to do was really kind of get sanding sticks in there and really work the sanding, which was kind of a bear to get scratches and stuff. In the end, the easiest thing I found was to use this is Tamiya sponge I just cut down. This is a 600 grit on a pair of reversible tweezers. And what I found was I could get this in there and really sand it down. So 600, and then I went back to 3000 to kind of smooth some of the scratches out. Still had some scratches, but most of it was taken care of because I then put down I forgot I had this, but Mr. Surfacer White 1500. So I sprayed this all inside, and it actually left a really nice kind of matte finish, like a very intakey look. So I sprayed that, which looked good. And then finally, rather than having a stark bright white, they're not pure white in real life, so I came back with some Insignia white. In this case, I have Attacker, which is lacquer paint. So that gave me this guy. Yeah, it's not totally perfect, but it's good enough for where we're at. A few little scratches and stuff inside it, but I mean, I'm at a stage where I've worked on this for a couple of weeks. I'm not, I can't spend my whole life working on one intake. So, I mean, pretty happy how it goes overall. So that's the front piece and the rear part of it. If you see there, this is just where it has some excess black mist paint, Mist Surfacer 1500 primer on it. I was using for primer, so I just sprayed it on top here. This will be painted white eventually. So yeah, so as again, this kind of fits into this part. And then there's your intake. Right, so moving along, we now have to attach the front wheel well. Now, it's metal, nice metal part comes with the kit, but what you have to do is you actually have to glue this in place and hold it in. But now as part of the build, typically gear I always do it at the very end, but again you have to glue it in now. So what I got is got a little super glue right here. It's telling you to glue it in. I looked to think about not using no glue. You don't really need any glue, to be honest with you. It fits pretty nice, but being gear, just want a little bit extra strength and just make sure this thing doesn't come apart or anything under the weight of the aircraft. So it just feeds through like that. See, I added some glue. Fits like that, and then I'm going to use my white top cement, or hexagonal from the US. Has different, same stuff, just as I always mentioned, just different type of glue, different type of box, sorry. And then it goes that way down. So I'm just going to, the whole inside of this, I'm just going to put some of the strong kind of resin glue. And if it fits one way, it goes that way. There it is. Push it down. So as you can see, you have to put that gear strut in because it fits underneath it, so there's no way out of that. So that's on the front of the intake there. And like I said, we did super glue first, hold it into the plastic, and then use the Tamiya cement to glue it in. What I might do is a little extra strength, just run some extra thin around the outside, just give some little bit extra, because again, you're taking the weight of the aircraft on the nose gear here, so just a little touch around the outside, just give it a little bit extra, and cool. So I'm going to let these dry and we'll come back and we'll do a little bit more work on these intake, should I say. Okay, making a lot of progress now. So, did the nose wheel bay there, added all the little struts and parts before I kind of sandwiched these two side parts onto it. Felt a little bit easier. Also, before you add these two sides, you got to add that strut in the middle there. Goes from the upper part as a whole. It slots right through. Used LP19 gunmetal to paint that, and yeah, looking really good. Did have a bit of a gap at the front here, so I had to use some filler and sand it to make it get rid of the gap, and just need to rescribe that panel right there. So that's the front part of the intake. Now the middle section, I guess, the middle back section, you see it's all together, those two parts are together and painted. I did use MRP Zinc Chromate, MRP A10, the acrylic. Now, why acrylic and not lacquer? Just basically because it's half the price. I only need a little piece for this one project, so yeah, so I just went with the acrylic version, which actually sprayed beautifully, mixed with X20A thinner. So that's the colour I used for the right here. The X4 in the instructions is a little bit more mustardy. This looks more realistic, I think, to what my reference pictures show. And then I just added it, kind of dirty it up a little bit, because obviously it's the engine bay, it's not going to be spotless. I added a Abtai 502 smoke, very like weak oil wash just all over it. Back here is LP11 for the metallic part, silver. And that's beautiful, it's sprayed so beautifully back here. I'm really happy how that looks. And then I just hand painted these bits and bobs right here. So that's that part, which is looking really cool. Then on the lower fuselage right here, went ahead and just painted it separately, then it slots and glues in. There's a little bit I hand painted all these pipes, which is a little bit tricky, but basically, yeah, put this in here. And all's left to do now is, you see there's 8 attachment points. Basically just line it up from the inside. It should just click into place. Line up. There you go. And just apply the 8 screws, which you get in the kit. Then there's the underneath. And then you're not going to see much because of the light, but that's the inside. Looking really good. Obviously, if you just have the engine in, never going to remove it. You don't need to worry about hand painting and doing all those details. You never see it, but like I say, the engine does slide in and out, which is a really nice touch. So I'm going to add those screws. Then from the other side, once that's in, you come with the front part of the intake, and that basically just sits on right that, and then to glue that in place, and there's a few other little parts and stuff, but that basically gives you a beautiful intake. So let me go ahead and get these 8 screws put in, and we'll come back and we'll carry on with the rest of it. Okay, so you see we made a ton of progress here. So basically made the whole intake trunking assembly and the wheel wells and the gear is pretty much done. So added those 8 screws here. My kind of gripe or little complaint about this kit is that there's tons of little screws and they're very similar to each other, maybe like a millimeter out, very tiny, and they're all thrown in the same bag, so it's really hard to figure out what's what. Between 3 and 4 mil and that kind of stuff. So the price of the kit and the way normally Tamiya does this stuff, it would have been nice if they kind of put the different screws in different size bags and kind of labeled it, so keep it separate, so you know one's MB3, one's MB2, that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of like kind of luck and skill, well, luck rather than skill involved. But anyway, I got the 8 screws in, a little bit loose, some of them, but so I recommend you would probably want to glue underneath as well, a little bit super glue or cement just underneath, just to hold it in, as well as screwing. But it's all in, that part, and then the gear. Nice solid metal. Unfortunately, you have to kind of do all this stuff now, not later in the build, because it kind of, the way the panels go on and stuff, it kind of goes on top of it. So you have to kind of build this now, like I mentioned. So it's all built. It should be fine. Like I say, solid metal, really solid. The only thing would be just to, when we come to paint it, it's going to take a little bit of masking and stuff, painting this white, and then the rest of it, obviously, the grey colours. But yeah, looking really good, as you can see. And it's really sturdy. Like, obviously, it's on its gear right now, and there it is. So you can kind of get an idea of the size and stuff too. One other thing to note is this little guy here, put that in before you had the intake on. It makes it a lot easier. I forgot and tried to add it in afterwards. It was a lot trickier. But yeah, other than that, just make sure you follow the instructions and do it in the order it asks in the instructions is pretty important too, especially in this gear here. Add certain parts in certain orders. Don't skip ahead because it's, yeah, like I say, it's a certain flow to get all this together. But yeah, that's done. So looking good shape. So next up, we're going to the next part. We'll get the cockpit in, which we did already. We'll screw into the front there with the nose weight, and then start sandwiching the two fuselages together. So until next week, thank you for watching, and have a good one. Goodbye.